I'm Jane, and I'm really pleased to be here today for our next webinar, which is on supporting your children with transitions, particularly those big transitions. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, if you could type them into the chat, and then we'll take questions at the end, or if you think of any at the end, we'll take some more questions then. So, okay. So what is transition? It's defined in the English Collins Dictionary as a change or passage from one state or stage to another. And that's from really small transitions, everyday transitions, to really big ones like changing schools, moving house, those kind of things. And generally, while we're making those everyday transitions, we're not really aware of what we're doing. We just do them because they're everyday and they're part of our routine. So we do them without thinking about it. But for many of our children with autism, even those daily transitions are quite a significant change that they have to think about and manage. So they don't automatically just happen for them. They might need a bit of extra support in managing those transitions, and they can be from changing clothes from pajamas to day clothes, and the other way around, from watching television to then having to go and sit and eat dinner, stopping playing with one activity to playing another, leaving the house, coming back into the house, garden to indoors, home to school, lesson to lesson. And school to home, and so on. There's hundreds of different transitions that we do each day, and as I said, for many of those children, those really small ones can be quite difficult for them. So why is that? Why are transitions more difficult for children with autism? Well, as you probably know, many of our children with autism like things to be the same. They don't like those changes to their routine because they like things to be predictable. So routines are important for them, and we've talked about those previously. But while they're doing something that they know and they're familiar with, it feels safe. So routines help them to feel safe, and doing an activity that they're quite comfortable with helps them to feel safe. And then when we ask them to change from that, it can then start to cause some anxiety. And as we know, the key areas of difference for people with autism are communication and interaction, sensory sensitivities, and restricted and repetitive behaviours, including flexibility of thought. And it's this area, this flexibility of thought, that can cause our children to struggle with transition. They can find it difficult to imagine what it might be like, what they're going to do next, what their new class is going to be like, what the next activity is going to be like. And they have to think about it, what they can do, and it's hard for them to look forward to and think, oh yes, it will be really nice, we're going to be doing this, because they haven't, especially if they haven't experienced it. So as I said, everyday transitions can be difficult, because it means stopping something that they're doing, which is predictable for them now because they're doing it, they're comfortable with it, and then they have to move on for something else. So you might find that if you're asking them to move from, say, for example, playing Lego and tidying it away, and then to come and sit at the table and have lunch, that they might need some time warnings for that to help them prepare for that change and that transition. You might be using, or you might need to use, a first and next board, where you draw what's coming next. So what are they doing now and what's going to happen next? And you might be using a visual timetable to show the order of the day, so they can go through that and see what's going to come next, so that helps them with each of those transitions from one thing to another. So those are the small day-to-day ones, which are small to us but can still be quite significant for our children. But the really big ones, so starting preschool or nursery school, then moving on to reception, moving from one year group to another. Some children are in infant school, so then they have to move to a junior school. Primary, that's a little bit easier because it's all usually in one building, but they still need support for each year group. And then moving on to secondary school, to college, to university, to work, and so on and so on. Really big transitions. major for all of us as well. And within those transitions, they are having to not only be in a new setting, new classroom, they have a new teacher, it might be a new building, there might be a new uniform, might be a new route to school, they might be meeting new people. And they're big changes for all of us, but for our children, they are massive and they can be hugely anxiety provoking. So lots of really good preparation can help them with that. So what can we do? Well, preparation is key. We can talk about the upcoming change positively. So, for example, if your child's going from nursery to primary school, so nursery to reception, you might start talking about what the school's like and what they've got in their play area, and the things that your child likes doing, and that they'll be able to do that when they get there. And something similar to that for each change that it's going to be. And just dropping that into conversations often. So just sort of starting to drip feed those changes. And then if you can, try and make sure that your child visits the new setting more than once. I know that many schools will offer one visit as a settling in session, and many will offer a lot more. If the one that you're going to only offers one, then do ask them. If you feel that your child would benefit from 2, 3, even 4, do ask, because most settings are really accommodating and they're happy to support you with those visits. It can also be helpful when you make those visits to go sometimes when there are no children around, so perhaps during an assembly time or after school or before school, so that they can have a good look around the classroom without lots of people there. It's really good for them to meet with their new teacher and ask them questions. And for you, if you get the opportunity to meet with the new teacher and ask them questions that you might have as well. And indeed, any other significant adults that are going to be in that setting. And then photos of those adults and the setting and other important areas. I'll put a picture here of where the children hang their coats. Things like that are really quite big for our children, and they need to know where all these things go and what they're going to look like. The lunch hall, the toilets, where they're going to put the water bottle, where they're going to put their book bags. All of those things are really, really important. We can do this ourselves, or we can ask the school to do it, the different settings. You can create a booklet with the pictures of the new setting. So if you ask the setting to send you some pictures, or when you go and do a visit, you could take pictures yourself. Or some schools may even have a booklet already made up for each transition each year. And if they haven't, they may well do this for you. So it's always worth asking. Make a list of all the things that your child is looking forward to, so that you can really focus on the positive. And when they start worrying, you can talk about those good things that they're looking forward to. And if there are any things that they're not sure about, together, so you and your child, try and find those answers. So look on the school website, or when you visit the school, ask the questions together. Or if it's later and they're about to start, you can always email or phone the school. But try and get the answers to those questions if you can. And then it can be quite useful to walk to school a few times in the weeks before starting, especially if it's a new setting, so they get used to that journey and they really become quite familiar with the way. And then when that first day of starting school comes, or starting a new class, it's not such a big shock. It can be helpful to use in your calendar or making up on a piece of paper the different weeks, and to show your child how many days until school starts, and then to cross them off each day so they can see how long it is, because that concept of time over the 6 weeks holidays is quite a long time. So if they can see that, they can see as it's getting closer to school. Write or ask the school to write a social story about starting school. Many schools, again, will have these already written, and they can be really helpful in helping your child to understand what's going to happen when they get there, who's going to be in the classroom, what they need to do first. If you haven't written one before and you're not very familiar with them, I'd suggest having a look at the Carol Gray Social Stories website. She is the developer of social stories, and hers are what you might call the proper social stories. So be careful what you look at online, because there are some not very good ones. There is a particular format in social stories, how they have to be written. So have a look at that. And you can create a communication profile about your child's strengths and differences and what helps them. Again, this is something that if your child's already at school and they're moving from one year to another, then the school may do that for you. Again, you can ask if they don't. We're going to look at that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. And try on the school uniform a few times before, especially if it's a new one. Now, if your child's got any sort of sensory sensitivities, then any scratchy labels or seams, if you wash them, it softens them up a bit. And it also helps them to get used to wearing those clothes and what it's going to feel like. So this is an example of a communication profile. There are many, many different ways of setting them up, but the idea is pretty much the same. So you have a photo of your child, you have all the things that they really like, what makes them happy, what their strengths are and what they're good at. Anything they don't like, so that then the setting knows that, and it's not too much of a shock if something happens and they don't like it. Things that they might find difficult and how they can be supported with that. So if you know that they're very fidgety and they find it difficult to sit still, it can be really good to, if you're trying like a sensory fidget toy or sitting on a particular cushion and you know that helps, then that can go on there as well. And then your child is already prepared with their fiddle toy or their cushion when they're expected to sit on the carpet at school. So these are also really good for passing on to any leaders of clubs, after school clubs, weekend clubs, anything like that. And then they can be updated each year as your child then moves on to the next stage, whether it's another class, another school. So those are really useful. So it's a lot of work, and it is a lot of work, but it can really help your child be prepared and help them to get ready for the next chapter in their life, because it is a big change, and of course we want our children to succeed and try and remove as much anxiety as possible.
Thank you all for being with us, and thank you for attending. Thank you for your questions, and please do share your feedback and suggest future topics on our feedback form, which you can find in the chat room. It will take you 20-30 seconds max, but it will really help us bring more value to you. And looking forward, we have our next webinar is about sensory differences, and it will be on the 18th of June. So please save the date. And if you want to receive Jane's weekly top tips, hear about future events, and receive news about Otsera's first game to be released soon, remember to join our newsletter and to follow us on social media. Thanks from Jane, from me, and Otsera team. And we look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks' time. Bye.
Bye.